Part 1, Born of Fire and Water. Imagine a man who chained himself to a ship's mast in the middle of a raging storm, simply to see how the sea would look when death clawed at the horizon. That man was William Turner. And he would become the greatest painter of storms, light, and fire the world had ever seen. The mystery at the beginning. In 1775, London was a city of soot and smoke, a place where the Thames stank of industry and the sky often glowed with the orange haze of burning coal. Out of this grime was born Joseph Mallard William Turner, a barber's son destined for something no one could predict. But even in his earliest days, people whispered that Turner was not like other children. He would stand for hours in silence, staring at reflections on water, tracing the shapes of clouds and soot-streaked skies. One relative recalled, the boy did not play. He watched. And when he watched, it was as if he swallowed the world with his eyes. Childhood shadows. Turner's childhood was no idyll. His mother sank into madness when he was still young, her mind fracturing under pressures the family could not withstand. She was confined to an asylum, leaving Turner with a father who, though loving, struggled to hold the family together. Perhaps it was this broken home that drove young William to escape into images, into visions of storms and fire that he scribbled onto scraps of paper. When other boys played, he painted. When others laughed, he sat in silence, sketching ships battling waves. It was not merely talent. It was obsession. Even then, Turner seemed possessed by something larger than himself. First sparks of recognition. By age 13, his father, realizing the boy's strange gift, began selling William's sketches in his barbershop. Customers marveled at the detail, the sense of motion. This boy, they said, sees the world differently. Soon, William entered the Royal Academy of Art, a world far beyond his humble beginnings. Among students of wealth and breeding, Turner was the rough outsider, the son of a barber with ink-stained hands. Yet when his brush touched canvas, all divisions vanished. By 15 he exhibited his first watercolors. Critics were astonished. He was a child, yet he painted with the gravity of an old master. It was as if storms, ruins, and horizons had chosen him as their voice. The hunger for experience. Turner's genius was not content with classrooms. He roamed the countryside, sketchbook always in hand. He clambered over ruins, trekked through rain, and stood by rivers at dawn, waiting for the first light to strike water. Once as a boy he nearly drowned trying to sketch a bridge during a flood. When pulled to safety he cried not from fear, but because he had lost the drawing. This was the boy who would grow into the man chained to a mast. This was not practice. This was a covenant with nature. Storms, fire, and light. Turner's obsession found its voice in water and fire. He sketched burning buildings, furious seas, skies ripped open by storms. He believed nature was not passive but alive, violent, divine. When London's Houses of Parliament burned in 1834, Turner rushed to the scene with sketchbook in hand, capturing the flames as they devoured history. Later, those sketches became paintings so vivid that onlookers swore they smelled smoke. But Turner was not a mere recorder. He painted not what the eye saw, but what the soul felt in the face of nature's fury. He once said, "It is not enough to paint what it looks like. One must paint what it is." And for Turner, nature was not calm, it was apocalypse. The solitary apprentice of chaos. As a young man, Turner worked tirelessly but also alone. His classmates mocked his rough manners, his mumbling speech, his obsessive sketches. He made few friends. But the isolation only deepened his bond with his father, who became his lifelong assistant, grinding pigments, stretching canvases, selling paintings. The barber became the servant of the storm. And the storm grew. The hook tightens. By his 20s, Turner was not merely promising, he was terrifying. His landscapes pulsed with energy unseen in British art. His seascapes swallowed ships. His ruins seemed to breathe tragedy. Whispers spread, was Turner a genius? Or was he touched by madness like his mother? The truth perhaps was both. For genius and madness often shared the same sky. And William Turner would spend his life painting that sky, until he became a storm himself. Part 2. The Rise of the Painter of Fire and Water. London on Fire. By his mid-20s, William Turner was no longer the barber's son hawking sketches in a shop window. He was a name whispered in the gilded halls of London's art world. His paintings were unlike anything the Royal Academy had seen before: fiery skies, violent seas, light that bled across canvas like molten metal. But his rise was not without scandal. Critics scoffed at his audacity. Too wild, they sneered, too unfinished, too chaotic. One reviewer dismissed his early oils as mere storms of paint. And yet, viewers could not look away. Because in those storms something lived. Something primal, something divine. The hunger for the sublime. Turner began traveling, chasing storms and ruins across Britain and beyond. He ventured into Wales, clambering up cliffs in pouring rain, sketching with his paper soaked and torn. In Switzerland, he stared at the Alps until they seared into his mind as walls of eternity. Everywhere he went, he filled sketchbooks with thousands of quick strokes. Mountains, clouds, rivers, light breaking through storms. To Turner, these were not studies. They were obsessions, fragments of a world larger than any canvas. When asked why he endured such hardship, he muttered simply, "One must suffer the storm to paint the storm." The rivalries of the Academy. At the Royal Academy, Turner quickly rose to prominence, but his presence unsettled others. Established painters, calm landscapists, genteel portraitists, saw in him not refinement but a threat. For Turner's works demanded not admiration but surrender. His canvases did not politely depict nature. They overwhelmed the viewer, pulling them into whirlpools of light and shadow. One rival sneered, "Turner paints not with brush but with thunder." He meant it as insult. Turner took it as compliment. The exhibition battles. At Academy exhibitions, Turner became infamous for his last-minute interventions. Days before the opening, he would return to his already hung paintings and slash across them with bursts of red, streaks of yellow, glazes of light. Critics gasped, sometimes horrified, sometimes awed. One student recalled, "It was as though he fought with his own painting until the very hour it met the public." He was a duelist with canvas as his opponent, and light as his sword. The storm at sea. One story became legend. On a voyage across the English Channel, Turner allegedly demanded he be tied to the mast of a ship during a storm. The captain protested, it was madness. But Turner insisted, "I must feel it. I must know." And so he was lashed to the mast, rain slashing his face, lightning searing his eyes, waves crashing over him. 4 hours he hung between life and death, swallowing the terror of the sea hole. When the storm passed and they untied him, he was half dead, trembling, but smiling. Months later, a painting emerged. A maelstrom of sea and sky so violent that viewers staggered before it. He had painted not the sea as it looked, but the sea as it felt in the moment of annihilation. And from then on, Turner was no longer merely a painter. He was a prophet of chaos. The obsession with fire. Turner's fascination was not only with water but with fire. When London burned, he ran to the flames. He sketched factories at night, furnaces glowing against black skies. His canvases glimmered with orange infernos, reflections dancing on rivers, cities swallowed by light. Critics called it grotesque. But Turner knew that fire, like the storm, revealed the sublime, the terrible beauty of destruction. "There is terror in beauty," he muttered once. "And beauty in terror. Isolation in fame." By his 30s, Turner was celebrated, wealthy, powerful within the Academy. Yet he remained a loner. His speech was mumbled, his manners rough, his clothes shabby. He avoided salons and soirees, preferring long walks in the rain or nights alone in his studio, muttering to himself as he layered color upon color. Friends were few. Love was fleeting. His only constant was his father, who lived with him, ground his pigments, stretched his canvases, stood silently by as the storm unfolded on canvas. Turner did not live among men. He lived among tempests. The hook tightens further. As his fame grew, so did his enemies. Many critics mocked him, calling his late works incomprehensible blurs. Some claimed he was going blind. Others whispered madness, inherited from his mother. But those who stood before his canvases knew better. In the whirlwinds of light, in the apocalyptic skies, in the seas that devoured ships whole, they saw not madness. They saw truth. And Turner was not done yet. Part 3: The Painter of Light and Darkness. The world at his feet. By the 1820s, William Turner was at the peak of his fame. No longer the awkward son of a barber, he was hailed as England's greatest landscape painter, a visionary whose canvases commanded staggering prices. He was elected Professor of Perspective at the Royal Academy, a title that gave him prestige, though his lectures were mumbled, incoherent, often incomprehensible to his students. Yet Turner's genius was undeniable. His paintings glowed with a light no one had ever seen before. Sunsets that seemed to burn the canvas itself, seas that churned with living fury, skies that cracked open like revelations. He was called the Painter of Light. But in truth he was as much the painter of darkness. The solitary genius. Despite his success, Turner lived more like a recluse than a gentleman. He avoided society balls, declined dinners, and often wandered London streets in disguise. His home was cluttered with canvases stacked against walls, pigments scattered across the floor, the air heavy with the smell of oil and turpentine. Only his father remained his constant companion, grinding colors, cooking meals, keeping the household from collapsing into total chaos. Visitors often found Turner working furiously, mumbling to himself, dabbing colors, then scraping them away, then attacking the canvas again as if in combat. He lived for one thing, the moment when the storm of paint became revelation, the death that shattered him. But in 1829 tragedy struck. His father, the quiet anchor of his life, died. Turner was devastated. For decades the old barber had been by his side, his assistant, his confidant, his only true friend. Now the storm raged without its tether. Friends noticed Turner withdrawing even further into solitude. His paintings grew stranger, more abstract, more violent. Critics accused him of losing his touch. But in truth, Turner was plunging deeper than ever into the essence of light and chaos. Grief had not broken him. It had consumed him, and turned his art into pure fire. The duel with tradition. Turner's works in the 1830s and 1840s confounded his peers. While other artists pursued detail and polish, Turner abandoned form, reducing ships, mountains, and cities to near blurs of light and color. At exhibitions, his canvases blazed like explosions among the tame landscapes of his rivals. Critics scoffed, "They are unfinished." But Turner answered simply, "They are finished enough." He no longer sought approval. He sought eternity. The burning of Parliament. On October 16, 1834, Turner witnessed the fire that destroyed the Houses of Parliament. Thousands gathered to watch the inferno devour centuries of history. Turner rushed to the scene, sketchbook in hand, capturing the flames as they turned the night sky into a living apocalypse. Later, his paintings of the event stunned audiences. Parliament engulfed in fire, reflected in the Thames, the city burning like the wrath of God. They were not just records of a disaster. They were visions of judgment, of mortality itself. Turner had once again transformed tragedy into the sublime. The painter and the sea. The sea remained Turner's greatest muse, and his greatest terror. He painted shipwrecks, tempests, fishermen swallowed by waves. He saw in the ocean both beauty and annihilation. In Snowstorm, Steamboat off a Harbor's Mouth, 1842, Turner painted a vessel engulfed by a hurricane, swirling with such violence that many called it madness on canvas. When accused of invention, Turner reportedly replied, "I was there. I was tied to the mast for 4 hours in the storm. I did not expect to survive. But I saw and I painted what I saw." Whether myth or truth, the story cemented his legend. Turner as the man who gave himself to storms so that mortals might glimpse them. The growing madness. But as the decades passed, Turner grew increasingly eccentric. He hoarded money, living in squalor despite his wealth. He muttered to himself, avoided old friends, disappeared for days. His paintings became so radical that some viewers thought him deranged. Yet in his wildest canvases lay the seeds of modern art, abstractions of light and color that would inspire the Impressionists decades later. He was no longer painting the world as it looked. He was painting the world as it felt, fleeting, violent, overwhelming. The poet of apocalypse. By the mid-19th century, Britain stood on the brink of industrial revolution. Steam, iron, and smoke transformed the landscape. Turner, instead of resisting, embraced it. He painted trains hurtling through rain, factories glowing with fire, bridges spanning rivers like titans of steel. But in every painting there was also tragedy, the smallness of man against the vastness of nature and time. In Rain, Steam, and Speed, 1844, Turner depicted a locomotive charging across a bridge, vanishing into mist. A tiny hare runs on the tracks before it, a symbol of fragile life before the unstoppable machine. Viewers were stunned. The painting was not merely about technology. It was about destiny. About the storm of progress devouring everything in its path. The hook deepens. Turner was no longer just an artist. He was a prophet of endings, of storms that swallowed ships, of fires that devoured empires, of machines that erased the old world. And yet, amid the chaos there was always light. A light that promised, even in destruction, something eternal. But as his canvases blazed brighter and wilder, Turner himself faded into shadow. His fame was immense, his influence unmatched. But inside, the storm was devouring him. Part 4, The Last Tempest. The Disappearing Master. By the late 1840s, William Turner was both celebrated and ridiculed. To the art world he was the greatest living painter of Britain, perhaps of Europe itself. Yet to neighbors and acquaintances, he was little more than a strange old man, disheveled, muttering, wandering the foggy streets of London in a cloak, his hat pulled low. He began to vanish for weeks at a time, retreating to the riverfront, living under assumed names and boarding houses. His wealth was vast, yet he lived in near poverty, refusing comfort as if punishing himself. The storms that once lived only in his paintings had now consumed his life. The women in his shadows. Turner never married, but rumors swirled of mistresses, secret children, and hidden liaisons. One longtime companion, Mrs. Booth, provided him shelter in Chelsea, where he lived under the false name Mr. Booth. Neighbors knew him only as a quiet, eccentric lodger who stared endlessly at the River Thames, sketching its mists, its tides, its dying light. To the world he was the great Turner. To those few around him, he was simply a weary old man waiting for the last storm. The light grows stranger. In his final years, Turner's art became more radical than ever. His canvases dissolved into pure color, yellows, reds, whites that seemed less like paint than like burning air. Critics mocked him viciously. Madness, they declared. Some even claimed he had lost his eyesight. But Turner knew exactly what he was doing. He was no longer painting the appearance of the world. He was painting the essence of light itself. His work was a glimpse of the future. Abstraction before abstraction, impressionism before impressionism. But his contemporaries could not yet see it. They only saw chaos where Turner had seen eternity. The final voyage. By 1850, Turner's health was failing. His body, worn by years of storms and solitude, could no longer keep pace with his burning vision. Still, he painted feverishly as if racing death itself. In December of 1851, hidden away in Chelsea, he collapsed. When doctors arrived, they found not Mr. Booth, but J.M.W. Turner, the greatest painter of England. His last words, whispered as the Thames glimmered in the distance, were said to be, "The sun is God." With that, the painter of light vanished into the light itself. The funeral of the painter of light. News of his death shocked the nation. Crowds gathered, artists wept. Critics who once mocked him now praised him as a genius beyond comprehension. Turner was buried in St. Paul's Cathedral, beside Sir Joshua Reynolds, the founding president of the Royal Academy. From a barber's son to the vaults of England's greatest heroes, his journey was complete. But Turner's true legacy was not stone or ceremony. It was the storm he left behind. The legacy of the storm. In the decades that followed, young painters discovered what critics could not, that Turner had seen further than anyone. Monet, Whistler, and the Impressionists would later draw upon his dissolving colors, his trembling light, his courage to abandon detail for feeling. Modern artists saw in him the father of abstraction, the prophet of a world where paint itself became emotion. Turner had not painted ships or seas or skies. He had painted time. He had painted death. He had painted eternity. The last canvas. Stand before Turner's late works today and you feel it. The silence before a storm, the trembling of the earth, the blinding of the sun. They are not just paintings. They are visions, cryptic messages left by a man who spent his life chasing light until it consumed him. And when you leave, you carry the unease that perhaps Turner was right. That the sun is God. That storms are truth. That beauty and terror are one and the same.